to the Author Showcase of Oshkosh. Each episode, we chat with a writer about their process, their goals, their recent work, and whatever else might be on their mind. My name's Bill Gillard. I'm an English professor at UW Oshkosh.
And I'm Dixie Jarko. We broadcast in the Oshkosh area on Spectrum Channel 10 and on AT&T Uverse Channel 99, as well as on our YouTube channel, Author Showcase of Oshkosh. I'm the author of 13 novels.
Good. Thank you. We're excited to be here. Today we're joined by Richie Zaborowske. He's a multi-genre author, dad, and a librarian from the Midwest, Neenah, Wisconsin in particular. He puts a contemporary twist on the traditional library offerings. His monthly short story night packs a local brewery and features trivia, comedy, and author interviews. His writing appears in McSweeney's, Internet Tendency, New World Writing Quarterly, Brevity, JMWW, Fractured Lit, Cease Cows, Jet Fuel Review, and elsewhere.
And we're excited to have you here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me. This is great. My name is Richie Zaborowske. I've been writing for about 4 or 5 years. I'm a librarian. I do the short story night at the Lions Tail Brewing in Neenah. We do that every second Monday of the evening, and it's a great time. So typically I try to do an interview with the author via Zoom, and we've had some big guests. I've had like Phil Clay on there. He's National Book Award winner. Disha Filia, a bunch of other well-known authors have joined us. Bobby Ann Mason, do you know her? Yeah. So she's, so we read the story. It's sort of like a book club, but it's for busy people, you know. So instead of doing a whole book, we just concentrate on the story, and it's a great time. So we have a blast doing that, and we packed the brewery doing that. So
that's really exciting. That's how Tom Cannon and I, who's our third co-host, we've been to the event. It's so different and so fun. It's a very, very interesting way to bring a community together. So, how did it start? How's it evolved? How has it grown?
Yeah, so when I'm doing library programming, I always think, what would I be interested in? You know, like, would I actually go to something? And for me, a book club, because I have 2 small children at home, I cannot get through a book once a month, you know? And I'm like, well, that's not going to work for me. There must be other people who are busy at different stages of their life who also can't get through a book. And I thought of like short stories because, you know, when you're in college, when you're going through college, that's the way a lot of times that's the way you're taught about, by using short stories. And I'm like, I think that could work in a real setting, or not that college isn't real, but you know, I think there's a market for that where people would be interested in doing just one short story, and instead of doing a 500-page book, right? And the first one we did a Ray Bradbury story. It was only a page long, and I'm like, oh my gosh, no one's going to come to this. Like, how are we going to get a conversation? You know, do an do an hour-long conversation based on a page of text. But it was great, and a bunch of people came, and they were excited, and I could tell no one was. I've heard this at book clubs. You know, like kind of half the people have maybe not quite read the book, and you can tell, you can tell they're lying.
It's true.
But everyone had read the text, and everyone had something to say, and it's great. So the nice thing about Short Story Night is there's people. It brings in all walks of life, all different age groups. So I have like college kids coming sometime, you know, and then I have people who are in a similar situation as me, and maybe they have kids at home and they don't have time for a traditional book club. But then there's a lot of people who are retired and of older, and they are just looking for something, something to do. And it's a great way to get your intellect going without a lot of commitment. So it's been absolutely great. I love it.
Awesome.
Yeah. And that's been going for about 7 years now. And then I started writing about 4 years ago and I'm sure a lot of authors have similar experiences. It took me about a year or so to find my voice. I thought I was like the next Hemingway or something, right? I was like doing all this serious stuff. But humor just kept coming through in my writing, and eventually I just sort of embraced that. So then I do like humor articles and stuff for McSweeney's and outlets like that. But I also write longer works. So I've been I won like second place in the Wisconsin People and Ideas Fiction Award a couple years ago.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's just been great. I love it. I especially like the short form. I like short stories. I think for me, there's nothing like sitting at home in the evening and sitting down with a good short story and being walloped, and be like, wow, that was amazing. My memory doesn't really, so if I read a mystery book or like a noir or something like that, and then there's like that change at the end, something happens at the end with the twist, and it's like, oh, Frank came back because he was in chapter 1. I'm like, well, who's Frank? My memory.
Because you're reading over a series of days.
Yeah, because it takes me so long, right?
Yeah.
And I just love short stories. I just think there's a lot of potential there.
Sure.
I'm surprised they're not more popular than they are with everyone on their phone and everything.
Yeah, because it seems like in our writing group, at least, everybody's working on short stories trying to get to a novel.
Yes.
And I particularly like the one about the hermit.
Oh.
You were going to be a hermit?
Oh, sure, yeah.
True story?
No, yeah, that's one of them. So there's a story I wrote about being a hermit, and it's actually someone from Chicago comes up, and this guy's sitting at the bar, and the guy from Chicago comes up, and he's looking for a hermit for his garden, because that actually used to be a thing back in like the 1700s. Rich people would have a hermit that would live in their garden. Wow. That's actually a funny story how the writing process behind that one was funny, because I was just zooming around online and I discovered that they used to have hermits. I'm like,
What's the purpose of a hermit?
Well, it would like take
now
care.
that I'm thinking of course, I need a hermit too.
Yeah, exactly,
I want
right?
to be a hermit. So
What's that?
I want to be a hermit.
Well, send me your resume. Like maybe
Nothing on it.
Yeah, what does it take to be a hermit, right? And he sort of convinced the guy too. He's like, yeah, you wouldn't have Wi-Fi or anything, or no, like the hut had Wi-Fi and stuff. He's like, you all set up. But yeah, a hermit, I think, is just a way to show off your wealth. Like, everyone can have a garden, but who has a hermit in their garden? But it's funny. But so I took that one. I took the idea, and if you read that one,
yeah.
I set it up to be like a joke, really.
Yeah.
So that's
It was funny.
Yeah. So I wanted that. That's the setup for it. It sort of took this like joke feel, I guess. Yeah. And a lot of that comes from, so when I was growing up, my dad's from the UP, right, Upper Michigan, and that's how I learned to tell stories. We'd be around the fire, and he was always like the last one up, okay? So it'd be my father and all of us cousins, and then he would start telling, he would tell all these stories, you learn about life. But he also told jokes too, and he would have these great long jokes that he would tell, and we would be riveted. That's how you learn about all this stuff. We'd be riveted, and that's where that comes in, though. I don't know. I like that sort of. Seems like a very Midwestern Wisconsin.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just reading about the tradition and the history of the very long form jokes. Yeah. Right? The ones where you're just, okay, but wait, you have to know this other thing. And wait, no, we're getting to that, right? And it's like 10 minutes later, you eventually get to the punchline. And that's a genre of joke telling that has a long, long history.
Yeah, and I like those because you can't memorize the whole joke, right? So you're improvising too, and that's how you start becoming a storyteller. So you're using when I tell my father's jokes now, I'm putting my own details in there.
Yeah,
sure. You know where the punchline lives.
Yeah,
but there are a lot of different
roads
to get there. Yeah. Good. So, back to the short story nights, which are just so much fun. And if you're in Neenah, Wisconsin on the second Monday night of any month for the foreseeable future, stop by Lions Tail Brewing Company. How has that evolved over the years? And what do you think its strengths are now? And where do you think it's going? Where do you want it to go?
Yeah. So if you've ever been to Lions Tail Brewery, it was an old bank at one time. And we started in the bank vault.
Oh, cool.
There. And like I said, I had maybe 10 people show up for the first time, and I'm like, wow, this is nice. We're have this vault full, They also have a back room, but by the third meeting, we were in the back room. And it's a pretty nice sized back room. Fits
Sure.
maybe 50 people if you really cram people in there. And we've been at capacity before.
Beautiful space.
Just about,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
It's a really cool room. So it's just such a fun night, and I really put a lot of effort into making sure the night moves along quickly, right? So we don't get bogged down. I try to keep the conversation going, and I think some of the strengths is the ability to. So I do small group discussion, so people can have their voice heard in a small setting, so they're not, some people are afraid to speak in front of the whole group, so we do some of that. But I also allow or give people the opportunity to give their take on the story, and try to, I think it's interesting so we do mostly contemporary stories, right? So I can't go online and find, if we did a Hemingway story, I could just go online and find the discussion questions.
Yeah.
I can't do that because sometimes the story just came out a few months prior. So I have to really go in there and figure out, okay, what are some discussion questions that's going to get discussion out of people today, people who are sitting in the brewery, So I think that's just a lot of fun. And doing contemporary stories gives us an opportunity to talk about and discuss a lot of contemporary topics. So that's been great, I think short stories are still very vital, and they can be written quickly enough to talk about contemporary things. And it's just been great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good.
Did you have a piece that you wanted to read for us today?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So a lot of my writing is about being a parent. And like I said, most of my stuff tends towards humor, so hopefully you'll find this one funny. So this one's called Better Than a Horse, Better Than a Horse. I duck out of work early to pick up my daughter Emma from daycare, but when I arrive, she comes rushing up to me. "We can't leave now," she says, breathless. "My turn is coming up." Because I'm a terrible parent, I have no idea what she's talking about. And because my wife died a few months ago and I still haven't figured out how to do a ponytail, let alone an elaborate braid, I noticed with a pang of guilt that Miss Aurora must have styled Emma's hair. "Turn for what?" I say, as a noise, a heavy whomp whomp whomp, passes overhead. Outside the window, the autumn leaves scatter and swirl, while the parking lot puddle next to my rusted-out Outback begins to tremble. A giggling stampede of children heads for the windows, while a red helicopter shakily descends from the sky and lands near a silver Lexus. The pilot, round helmet, dark sunglasses, smug goatee, waves a gloved hand. The kids shriek with delight. "What's that?" I ask. Emma looks up at me like I'm an idiot. "That's Henry's show and tell." The teacher, Miss Aurora, a lady with large hoops in her ears who exudes a cool authority and patchouli, claps her hands. "All right, friends, back to the chill zone." Peeling themselves from the window, the children head toward the beaded curtain and beanbags. Still staring at the helicopter, wondering what the hell is going on, I slink into a small wooden chair. The teacher asks, "Are there any questions for Henry?" A classroom of 4- and 5-year-old hands shoots up. I raise mine as well. I have questions. Madison, blue frozen Disney shirt, light-up shoes, White House reporter's death stare, is called on. "Henry," she says, standing, "with its absurdly high CO2 emission rate, how can you justify using a helicopter?" I scooch up the chair. I too want to know how Henry makes amends with his little conscience. A moose pokes its head through the classroom door. "Nora," Miss Aurora says with a lilt in her voice, "your show and tell's here." Relieved, Henry sits back down while the moose, furry antlers drooling all over, clomps into the room. I scooch back. "My parents vacationed in Canada," Nora says, waving her hand at the moose as it inhales a succulent off a cabinet, "and they brought me back a moose, which is like a horse, but better." Miss Aurora nods. The hoops in her ears swing. "You don't realize how large they are until you're up close." Perhaps too large, because even though it appears to be ducking, the moose's antlers are demolishing the ceiling tiles. Popcorn-like particles rain down while the children watch enthralled. Miss Aurora pats the beast on the rump. "Such a majestic animal." She seems so calm compared to my heart, which is racing so fast that I wonder if I'm overreacting because I'm beginning to freak out. Better than a horse, I repeat to myself as the moose kicks out a hind leg and snaps the faucet off the children's sink in half like a twig. The kids scream. I scream louder. Water gushes into the air, but Miss Aurora is already sweeping across the room in her Birkenstocks and turns the water shut-off valve. The moose laps the puddle at its feet. Water, Miss Aurora says, nature's nectar. Is this, I say to Miss Aurora, lowering my voice so I don't alarm the children, an emergency situation? Don't be silly, she says. Some of the parents tend to get a little overboard, but it's all right. The moose looks up at me accusingly. Bits of ceiling tile are stuck in its beard. Harper, a round-faced girl with severe bangs and a helmet of thick blonde hair, goes next. Tossing paper money into the air, she explains that her mother is a branch manager at a bank, and she brings Harper home the leftover cash. As the windfall scatters, the children scramble, and I recall the time I tried to impress Emma with a drafting ruler that I had swiped from work. I snap out of it when a bill lands near my foot. Not knowing if the money is intended only for the kids, like a parting gift at a child's birthday party, I place one of my chunky Hoka sneakers over Ben Franklin's face. When I see Miss Aurora pluck a 20 from the air, I stuff the bill in my pocket. Emma, says Miss Aurora, your turn, sweetie. My heart sinks. She's been through so much, but she's so determined, so fierce. Seeing her march up there empty-handed because I forgot her show and tell reminds me that I'll never be the parent Emma deserves. Then Emma smiles, a rare, wonderful, happy smile. My dad is my show and tell, she says. Miss Aurora waves me forward, and I move toward the two of them in a joyous daze, like a contestant on a game show getting called up from the audience. Questions? Miss Aurora asks. Madison raises her hand. My stomach plummets. What is your father's profession? Dressed like that, I'm guessing it's in a field involving little face-to-face human interaction. Madison, Miss Aurora says, let's use our kind words. A physician prescribed Emma's dad those shoes. What? I look down at my chunky Hokas. No, I bought these at Kohl's, and I'm an accountant. It's actually fun. I get to... My dad's in space, Madison says, cutting me off. Really? I ask, impressed. Madison crosses her arms. The bottom of one shoe flashes. He's an astronaut on the space station. Miss Aurora throws back her head and spread her arms to what's left of the ceiling. He could be orbiting above us right now, she says. Well, my dad, Emma says, her hand slipping into mine, is right here.
Oh.
Yeah, that's nice. Huh?
That's really brilliant. Yeah. You do a lot of those things in other stories that are just bring you so close into family relationships.
Yeah, so I try to, so I'm making fun of the fact, my kids were in daycare, and sometimes parents tend to get a little, it's like a competition thing,
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Not me or you.
Yeah.
Others.
I would never do that. I would
No.
never, actually, so one time I brought in, because the Neenah library used to have a 3D printer, which I ran, and I had made this hand, like you could 3D print a hand, and it was like a working hand. It was amazing. And my daughter was in daycare, she's like 4 or so, and I brought it in. I'm like, wow, this is really, because they had show and tell, I'm like, this is really going to impress all the kids. Well, someone else had brought in a puppy. So
You're done.
I had my hand out and no one cared. So, but what I try to do is, so I'm sort of making fun of that idea that it's very competitive now and parents.
Sure.
Yeah. But I always like to bring it back. I try to have a little heart in my stories, even if I'm being sarcastic or doing satire or something.
Sure. And you really blend, because the choice, the first person point of view, you're kind of blending a lot of lines there. You as a parent of small children and some formerly small child. Right?
Yeah.
You're presenting these in a very kind of like believable way, in a way that creative nonfiction might.
Yeah.
In presenting stories that are made up for the most part.
Yeah.
So what goes into that decision? How do you find that voice, that first person voice, and not just have it just be your voice again and again?
That's a great question. I wish I knew it. Sometimes the process is a little mysterious.
Does it sound different in your head? Do you ever begin with an idea and then hear somebody else talking through you, that kind of thing, while you're writing?
Depends on how much I've been drinking, I guess. But no, really. I don't know. So it all depends on what I'm writing, I guess. But I think, so I do a lot of humor articles, and with those, you're always trying to do like a hermit crab type thing. So you'll be doing like a diary entry or something. I wrote one the other day, which was around Thanksgiving. So it's a journal entry from Catherine, the first picky eater. So she's the first picky eater at Thanksgiving, right? So
Okay.
she's at like Thanksgiving, but she's a picky eater. So her dad's like, you got to eat the waterfowl, you know? And she's like, well, I don't want to. So, I mean, so I don't know. But even there, you're asking about voice. So even there, it's not really my voice at all, right? I'm trying to change it, but I'm still writing about things that I know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I tiptoed around your question or not. But
No. You also do a great job with dialogue too, and I think that the teacher here, even what was the death stare of a White House reporter?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
You're creating characters there, not only just through description, exposition, but through their voice as well.
Yeah.
And that's something that struck me about your writing, that the voices are noisy.
Yeah.
In a way that some stories you read and they're just kind of quiet on the page and you're just getting information, but yours are jumping around.
Yeah, I think I have a short attention span a little bit, and all the craft books I've ever read were like, get in there, set up your fighters and get them going right away. And it's funny because when I read, I love short stories, and most short stories I just love reading. I always read the best American short stories, but a lot of times I'm like, well, how are they getting away with that? Because like the first 2 pages are kind of boring, Well,
Yeah.
So I really try to stick to that, like get in there and try to limit your backstory.
Sure.
And
Yeah, there's a long tradition of kind of wandering through a labyrinth to get to the point. I've been reading a lot of H.P. Lovecraft lately for a different project. And sometimes, you're 1/3 of the way in, and you still don't quite know, maybe the two opposing forces here, because you're just learning about this, decrepit old man who's living in this house that's falling down, and just then, yes, there is that portal there.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's more of an older style, when
It
people
could be.
didn't have like TV and other things to distract them, because like even Wuthering Heights or any of those, they start so slow. You got to get through or Moby Dick, the first 100 pages. There's not a whole lot that goes on, but now people would just be like, hey, you got to have something in the first paragraph to catch my attention, or I'm going to something else.
Yeah, and I think some authors are just great writers, though, and they just have this way to just pull you along somehow. And I can't figure out quite how to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, I don't know.
Oh, don't sell yourself short. I mean, I was thinking like Flannery O'Connor almost, with just the way that the character's the thing that draws you.